The heavy rain battered the windows of Lincoln High School that Friday afternoon, drumming a restless rhythm into the hollow, empty halls. The students had already gone. Teachers rushed to their cars. The building stood quiet, except for the lonely sound of muffled sobbing echoing from a dark corner of the stairwell. Nobody heard it. Nobody cared. Except one man, a man whose life was already marked by quiet tragedies and unseen kindnesses. A man wearing a janitor's uniform pushing a rusty cleaning cart. But what started as an act of compassion would spiral into a betrayal he never saw coming, and a secret that would change everything. Henry Carter had worked at Lincoln High for nearly 7 years. To the students, he was invisible. To the teachers, he was background noise. Nobody asked about his life. Nobody knew about the worn photo he kept in his pocket, a reminder of everything he'd lost. Nobody cared why a man with kind eyes and a quiet smile had ended up sweeping floors. That afternoon, as Henry rounded the corner near the science wing, he heard it. A soft, broken cry. He stopped, listened, and slowly he pushed open the stairwell door. There, crumpled on the floor, was a girl, knees pulled to her chest, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked barely 16. Henry hesitated. He knew the rules. No touching, no questions, no risk. But he also knew the look of someone drowning in silence. Gently, Henry cleared his throat. "Miss, you all right?" he asked, voice low and careful. The girl flinched, wiping her face furiously. "I'm fine," she snapped, but her shaking voice betrayed her. Henry didn't move closer. He simply lowered himself to the floor, keeping a respectful distance. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly, "but it's okay if you do." For a long, aching minute, the girl said nothing. Then, in a torrent of broken words, she spoke. "My dad's leaving. He doesn't want us anymore." Henry's heart cracked quietly in his chest. He listened, not with the false patience of adults waiting to correct, but with the full, aching weight of someone who understood abandonment too well. When she finished, she stared at the floor, breathing hard. Henry slid a clean, folded handkerchief across the floor toward her. No word, just a gesture. The girl took it with trembling fingers. But compassion has consequences in a world built on suspicion. Unbeknownst to Henry, Principal Rowan had just returned to the building, umbrella dripping, frustration etched across his face from a board meeting gone wrong. He turned the corner and froze. There was Henry, sitting on the floor beside a crying student, handing her something. Rowan's eyes narrowed. No context, no understanding, only assumptions. "Hey!" he barked. The girl jumped up, startled. Henry rose slowly, hands raised slightly. "She was upset," he began calmly. Rowan's face twisted in fury. "Step away from her." Now. The girl opened her mouth to explain, but Rowan silenced her with a glare. "Go home, Emily," he snapped. The girl, Emily, hesitated, throwing a desperate look at Henry. Then she fled, leaving Henry alone, exposed. Rowan didn't wait for explanations. He launched into accusation. Inappropriate behavior, breaking boundaries, jeopardizing the school's reputation. Henry's protests were quiet, measured, and ignored. By Monday morning, a letter sat on the desk of every faculty member. Henry Carter, terminated, effective immediately. No hearing, no defense, no second chances. Just like that, the man who swept their floors, cleared their trash, fixed their broken desks, was gone. Invisible once more. At home, Emily stared at the handkerchief Henry had given her. She hadn't told anyone about her father's threats, the screaming matches, the nights she curled up wishing to disappear. Henry had listened, not judged, not scolded, just listened. And now, because of her silence, he was gone. But Henry Carter wasn't who they thought he was. Buried in the school's dusty archives, untouched for years, was a personnel file marked confidential. Inside were documents few had ever seen, a distinguished service medal for bravery, letters from former students he tutored anonymously after hours, a resignation letter from a once famous university citing personal tragedy. Henry Carter was not a failed man. He was a man who had chosen quiet service over glory after losing his wife and only son in a car accident he couldn't prevent. The janitor wasn't a failure. He was a hero who had hidden his light because the world had burned him for shining once before. News traveled fast. A teacher leaked Henry's termination to a local blogger. The post went viral. Beloved janitor fired after helping crying student. Parents demanded answers. Former students shared stories of how Henry's quiet kindness had saved them during their darkest times. Donations poured in. Protests erupted outside Lincoln High's polished gates. Signs waved, "Bring Henry back." Compassion isn't a crime. Principal Rowan watched from his office, the once proud banners of his career wilting under the heat of public outrage. But it wasn't enough, because Henry Carter had already left town, gone without a word, just like before. But Emily hadn't forgotten. She clutched the handkerchief every night, vowing to make it right. And one rainy afternoon, with determination burning in her chest, she stood outside the local news station holding a letter. A letter that began, "I need to tell you about the janitor who saved my life." She handed it to the receptionist with shaking hands. And deep in the city, in a small rented room above a bookstore, a tired man named Henry Carter sat alone, unaware that his story was about to ignite something even bigger than he could ever imagine. The screen fades to black. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, phone clutched in her hand. The news station hadn't responded yet. Doubt gnawed at her. What if no one cares? What if no one believes me? But then her phone buzzed. A simple email flashed across the screen. "Come in for an interview. We want to hear your story." Emily's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. This was it. Her chance to speak the truth. For Henry. For herself. For everyone who had been silenced. Miles away, Henry Carter sipped stale coffee at a small diner, his duffel bag resting by his feet. He read the local headlines on an abandoned newspaper. "Janitor fired after helping student, outrage grows." His photo, grainy, unflattering, stared back at him. Henry shook his head, folding the paper away. He hadn't helped Emily for attention. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted to disappear, the same way he had after losing his family. But deep down, something stirred. A faint, stubborn ember refusing to die. At the news station, Emily sat under the bright lights, fidgeting nervously. The anchor, a kind-looking woman named Ms. Delaney, leaned in. "Tell us what happened," she said gently. Emily took a shaky breath and spoke. She told them about the stairwell, about how Henry had listened, about how he had handed her a clean handkerchief and asked for nothing in return. She spoke about how she had needed someone, anyone, to see her pain. And Henry had seen her. Not with judgment, but with kindness. By the end, Ms. Delaney blinked back tears. "So," she said carefully, "you're saying Mr. Carter was wrongfully terminated?" Emily nodded fiercely. "He didn't just help me," she said. "He saved me." The interview aired that night, and by morning, Lincoln High's walls shook. Social media exploded. Justice for Henry trended locally within hours. Former students, teachers, even parents came forward sharing their own stories. Henry fixing broken lockers after hours, tutoring struggling kids, unofficially. Driving a student home once when her father was too drunk to pick her up. Each story painted the same picture. A quiet hero, ignored until it was almost too late. Petitions flooded in. Demands for Principal Rowan's resignation grew louder. But Rowan wasn't ready to surrender. Because Rowan, too, had a secret he desperately needed to keep hidden. One Henry Carter could expose if he ever chose to speak. Across town, in a sleek corner office, a man watched Emily's interview with keen interest. He was sharply dressed, mid-50s, with silver hair and calculating eyes. A plaque on his desk read, "Dr. Marcus Reed, President Briarwood Academy." He tapped his fingers together thoughtfully. "We could use a man like Carter," he murmured to his assistant. "Track him down, quietly." Because some people didn't just want Henry reinstated. Some wanted him for something bigger, something dangerous. Back at Lincoln High, Emily faced cold stares and whispered threats. Some students, children of the school board members and big donors, saw her as a traitor, a troublemaker, a liar. One afternoon, someone scrawled "snitch" across her locker in red marker. Emily stared at it, heart hammering. Doubt slithered back into her mind. But when she opened her locker, tucked inside was a folded note. "Don't stop fighting. He fought for us too." No name, no signature, just courage passed like a torch. Emily wiped her eye and kept going. Meanwhile, Principal Rowan's facade cracked. The board called emergency meetings. His superiors demanded explanation. Desperate, Rowan reached out to an old contact, someone skilled in making problems disappear quietly. Because if Henry's full background was exposed, if people learned who he really was, it wouldn't just be Rowan's job at risk. It would be his freedom. Because years ago, Rowan had covered up something terrible involving another student, and Henry Carter had been the only one who suspected the truth. Late one evening, as Emily left school after a student council meeting, she found a note tucked under the windshield of her mother's car. In thick, angry handwriting, it read, "Stop digging. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Her hands shook. She scanned the parking lot. Empty. Silent. But for the first time, fear slid cold into her bones. This wasn't just about Henry anymore. This was about something much, much bigger. And someone powerful was willing to do anything to bury the past. The camera slowly zooms out from Emily standing frozen in the parking lot and fades to black. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the crumpled warning note. "Stop digging." The words burned into her mind. Her mother knocked gently on the door. "Sweetheart, you okay?" Emily forced a smile. "Yeah, Mom, just tired." But inside, fear gnawed at her. She wasn't just fighting for Henry anymore. She was fighting against people willing to destroy her to protect their lives. At a dusty motel on the outskirts of town, Henry Carter sat in silence, flipping through an old, worn-out folder. Inside were yellowed papers, newspaper clippings, and photos from years ago. One headline caught the light: "Local principal cleared after student's mysterious injury." Another: "Family withdraws complaint amid school pressure." Henry's hands trembled. He had tried to forget, tried to move on. But the truth had a way of clawing back to the surface, especially when innocent people were in danger again. Henry picked up his phone. For the first time in years, he dialed a number he promised he'd never call. The line rang once, twice, and then a calm voice answered, "You're not supposed to contact us." Henry's voice was steady. "They're hurting kids again. I need your help." Across town at Briarwood Academy, Dr. Marcus Reed received an encrypted message. He read it twice. Then he smiled grimly. "Game on," he whispered. Because Henry Carter wasn't just some janitor. He was once part of an underground network of advocates, people who fought to expose corruption in educational systems quietly, secretly, when the system itself failed. They had believed Henry was lost to grief, but now he was back and ready to finish what he started. Meanwhile, Emily couldn't sit still. She needed answers. Sneaking into the school library after hours, she dug into old yearbooks, board meeting notes, and archived articles. At the bottom of a dusty box labeled "Confidential, Staff Only," she found it: a series of incident reports, all marked closed, names blacked out, dates erased. But one line caught her eye: faculty discouraged further inquiry to protect school's reputation. Among the barely legible signatures, she recognized one name: Rowan. And beside it, another signature she didn't recognize. A signature that matched the man who had slipped into the school the night Henry was fired. Someone bigger than Rowan. Someone pulling strings from the shadows. As Emily left the library, the cool night air stung her face. She tucked the documents into her backpack, heart pounding. She didn't see the dark sedan parked across the street. Didn't notice the camera lens peeking from the half-open window. Inside the car, a figure spoke quietly into a phone. "She knows. Do we proceed?" A voice on the other end responded without hesitation. "Take care of it," quietly. Henry didn't waste time. He met with an old contact, a woman named Linda, once an investigative journalist, now operating a blog dedicated to uncovering small-town corruption. She listened to everything he had kept locked away for years. The principal's cover-up, the silent student, the backroom deals. When he finished, she leaned back, her eyes fierce. "We expose him," she said. "But first," Henry warned, "we protect the girl." Because if Emily kept digging, she wouldn't just be targeted. She could be destroyed. Late that night, Emily received a text from an unknown number. "Meet me behind the school at 11 p.m. I have evidence. Come alone." She hesitated. Fear twisted in her stomach. But curiosity and hope burned hotter. She tucked the documents into her backpack and slipped out the window. Across town, Henry's phone buzzed. He read the alert from a hacked security feed. His face paled. Emily. Alone. Targeted. Without waiting, Henry raced into the night, heart pounding, fear clawing at him. Because he knew something Emily didn't. This wasn't a meeting. It was a trap. And Emily had just walked straight into it. The camera zooms out as Emily approaches the darkened back entrance of the school and fades to black. The wind howled through the abandoned playground as Emily crept behind the school. She pulled her jacket tighter, heart hammering in her chest. The message had said, "Come alone," and she had obeyed. Clutching her backpack with the stolen documents, Emily scanned the shadows. "Hello?" she called softly. "Who's there?" Silence. Her breath misted in the cold air. She almost turned to leave when she saw him. A man stepped from the shadows. Not a teacher, not a student, Someone she didn't recognize, tall, in a dark jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that made her blood run cold. "You're a brave one," the man said, voice low and amused. "Too bad bravery won't save you." Emily took a step back. The man snapped his fingers. Two more figures emerged behind her, cutting off her escape.
Panic surged through her.
She fumbled for her phone, but before she could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth. Terror exploded inside her. They grabbed her arms roughly, dragging her toward a black SUV parked by the dumpsters. Emily kicked and fought, but they were too strong. She realized, too late, that no one knew she was here. No one except Henry. Henry's truck roared down the side streets, headlights cutting through the night. Every second was a punch to his heart. He cursed under his breath, weaving between cars, ignoring traffic lights. "Hold on, Emily," he thought desperately. "I'm coming." Across town, Linda, the investigative blogger, helping Henry piece together the final part of the puzzle. A pattern of payouts, threats buried under legal jargon. The same figures appearing again and again, hush money tracing all the way back to Rowan's office. And one other name kept surfacing, Dr. Marcus Reed of Briarwood Academy. Linda leaned back in her chair, horror dawning on her. "This wasn't just about Henry," she whispered. "This is a whole network. And if Emily found proof of it, they would stop at nothing to silence her." Emily twisted violently, managing to kick one man in the shin. He cursed, loosening his grip for a split second. Emily broke free, bolting toward the fence. Freedom shimmered just a few yards away, but she wasn't fast enough. A heavy arm slammed into her waist, lifting her off her feet. She screamed, a raw, terrified sound that tore into the night, and just as they shoved her into the SUV, headlights flooded the parking lot. Henry's truck screeched to a stop. He leapt out, fists clenched, eyes blazing. "Let her go," he roared. The men froze, just for a heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Henry charged. He wasn't young anymore. He wasn't trained like them anymore. But he fought like a man who had already lost everything once and refused to lose again. He tackled one man to the ground, swinging wild, desperate punches. Emily struggled inside the SUV, trying to unlock the door. One of the kidnappers pulled a knife. Henry ducked just in time, slamming the door into the man's face. Blood spray. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard Emily scream. Backup was coming. But Henry knew they didn't have much time. These men would run, or worse. Just when Henry thought he had the upper hand, a new figure appeared from the other side of the lot. Calm, smiling. Principal Rowan. Henry's blood ran cold. Rowan walked slowly toward them, hands in his pockets, as if he were just taking a stroll. "You never knew when to quit, did you, Carter?" Rowan said softly. Emily, still struggling inside the SUV, screamed through the window. Rowan glanced at her, cold and indifferent. "You should have stayed invisible," he murmured. Henry stared at him, disbelief and rage flooding through him. The man he had once tried to expose, the man who had buried his crimes under silence, wasn't just complicit. He was orchestrating it all. And now he stood before Henry with power, money, and no shame. The camera zooms in on Henry's stunned, furious face as Rowan gives a small nod, signaling the kidnappers to finish what they started. The screen fades to black. Henry squared his shoulders, facing Rowan across the cracked asphalt. Around him, the thugs tightened their grip on Emily, who struggled frantically inside the black SUV. Sirens screamed louder now, closer. Rowan's smirk faltered slightly. "You always thought you could save the broken ones," Rowan sneered. "But you're just another janitor now, Carter. No one's coming for you." Henry didn't respond. He just took a slow, measured step forward, and another. Every breath he took was heavy with memories of the kids he couldn't save, the silence he once accepted. Not this time. The nearest thug lunged. Henry sidestepped and slammed his elbow into the man's ribs. The second one swung a crowbar, missing by inches as Henry ducked and drove his fist into the man's gut, but he was outnumbered. The third thug grabbed Henry from behind, wrenching his arm back painfully. Rowan watched, amused. "You're wasting your last moments," he called out. Henry gritted his teeth against the pain. His eyes locked on Emily, wide-eyed, terrified. And suddenly, with a surge of strength born from pure will, Henry slammed his head backward into his captor's nose. The thug cried out, loosening his grip. Henry broke free. Just as Rowan motioned for more men to finish Henry, headlights flooded the parking lot. A battered pickup truck roared onto the scene, and out jumped Linda, the blogger, armed with her phone recording every second. "Smile, Rowan," she shouted. "You're about to go viral." Other cars pulled up behind her. Parents, former students, even local reporters. Word of Emily's bravery had spread faster than anyone realized. And now the town was watching. Rowan's face twisted in fury. The game had changed. But he wasn't done playing dirty yet. Inside the SUV, Emily spotted her chance. The driver, distracted by the commotion, had left the door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she kicked hard. The door swung open. She tumbled out, scraping her knees on the gravel. Henry saw her fall. "Run!" he roared. Emily staggered to her feet, sprinting toward the crowd gathering at the edge of the lot. Two thugs gave chase. Henry bolted after them, forcing his battered body to move faster. He tackled one to the ground, grappling fiercely. Linda and a few parents rushed forward, helping shield Emily. But Rowan had planned for this. Out of the shadows, a new figure stepped forward, tall, imposing, with a badge glinting on his belt. Sheriff Dalton, an old friend of Rowan's.
A man bought and paid for.
Dalton raised a megaphone. "This is a police matter," he barked at the crowd. "Disperse immediately or face arrest for obstruction." The crowd wavered, uncertain. Rowan smiled grimly. "See?" he said quietly to Henry. "You can't win. The system protects itself." Henry stumbled to his feet, bleeding and breathless. He yanked something from his pocket, a flash drive, held it high for everyone to see. "This holds everything," he shouted, voice raw. "Proof of Rowan's cover-ups, the assaults, the bribes, everything." Linda's eyes widened. "Get it online," she screamed. Henry tossed the drive toward her. It arced through the air, a fragile, desperate hope in the night. Linda caught it, just barely. The crowd roared. Sheriff Dalton hesitated, glancing nervously at Rowan. Because suddenly the world was watching, and this wasn't just a parking lot anymore. It was a battlefield for truth. Rowan's face twisted into rage. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket, concealed all along. The crowd gasped, scattering. He aimed it not at Linda, not at Henry, but directly at Emily. Time seemed to freeze. Henry screamed, lunging forward. Linda cried out, and Emily, eyes wide, frozen in terror, couldn't move. A single gunshot shattered the night. The screen fades to black. For a split second, the world froze. The smell of gunpowder burned the air. Screams tore through the parking lot. Henry tackled Emily to the ground, covering her small body with his own. He braced for pain, for death, but it didn't come. Slowly, Henry lifted his head. Emily stared back, wide-eyed but unharmed. The bullet had missed, by inches. Seeing his plan crumble, Rowan cursed under his breath and bolted for his car. The thugs scattered into the night like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Sheriff Dalton hesitated, caught between loyalty and survival. But the crowd wasn't frozen anymore. Linda shouted, "He tried to kill a child." Parents swarmed forward. Dalton backed away, shouting into his radio, but too late, because the proof Henry's flash drive was already uploading, live-streamed onto social media for thousands to see. Rowan's empire was crumbling before his eyes. At home, phones buzzed with alerts. Screens lit up with headlines, Principal Rowan involved in kidnapping cover-up. Hero janitor fired after saving student. Police complicity exposed? The town, once blind, could no longer look away. Whispers became shouts, and those who once stayed silent finally chose a side. Inside the circle of the crowd, Henry helped Emily to her feet. Her knees were scraped. Her hands trembled, but she was alive. She clutched his arm tightly, refusing to let go. "You saved me," she whispered, voice breaking. Henry smiled sadly. "No, kiddo," he said. "You saved yourself. I just showed up." For a moment, everything felt almost peaceful. But it wouldn't last, because Rowan wasn't gone. And his secrets ran deeper than anyone imagined. Linda rushed over, her phone vibrating wildly. "You need to see this," she said urgently. She showed Henry the screen. Not just Rowan. Not just Sheriff Dalton. Names scrolling down, connected through donations, fake charities, shady contracts, school board members, business owners, city council leaders. A web of corruption that stretched beyond Lincoln High. Henry's stomach twisted. Rowan wasn't the spider. He was just a thread in a much larger, darker web. And exposing him was only the beginning. Across town, in a hidden safe house, Rowan nursed his wounded pride and plotted revenge. He watched the viral videos playing on a cracked tablet, face darkening with every passing second. "You think you've won?" he muttered. He pulled out a phone and dialed. A gruff voice answered. "Plan B," Rowan said. "Target the girl again? End this?" A cold laugh echoed through the receiver. Rowan smiled cruelly. "This time, make sure she doesn't get up." Later that night, Henry escorted Emily back to her house, refusing to leave her side. Emily's mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. Henry stood guard at the door, every muscle tense. But hidden across the street, two dark figures watched, waiting, planning. And in the palm of one man's hand, a small device blinked red. A remote detonator. Because this time, they weren't coming to kidnap. They were coming to destroy everything. The camera slowly zooms in on the blinking light in the darkness and fades to black. The night was unnaturally still. Henry stood by Emily's front door, eyes scanning the quiet street. Every rustle of leaves, every flicker of light, prickled against his skin like a warning. Inside, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her mother, trying to do homework, pretending, desperately, that everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore, and danger was closer than they knew. Across the street, a figure pressed a button on the detonator. A sharp beep broke the silence. Then, boom! The explosion tore through the front yard, a wall of fire and debris shattering windows, setting alarms screaming. Henry was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. Emily screamed, clutching her mother as flames licked up the porch. Neighbors rushed outside, gasping at the inferno consuming the house. Henry scrambled to his feet, coughing, eyes burning. He staggered toward the front door. "Emily!" he bellowed. Through the smoke, he saw her tiny and terrified, trapped behind a fallen beam. Without hesitation, Henry dove through the fire. Inside, smoke filled the air like a living thing, choking every breath. Henry lifted the beam with shaking arms. "Come on, kiddo," he gasped. "We have to move." Emily's mother pulled Emily free, tears streaking down her soot-covered face. Together, they stumbled out into the yard as neighbors rushed forward, helping them away from the crumbling house. Henry collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. They were alive, barely, but the house, their memories, their safety was gone. And Rowan's message was clear: no one was safe. Across town, Rowan sat in a dim, smoke-filled bar. He raised a glass in silent toast to the burning house flashing across the news on the TV overhead. But beside him, a woman in a sharp black suit watched the screen with a frown. "You're drawing too much attention," she said coolly. Rowan smirked. "Attention is the point. Let them know what happens to those who betray me." The woman shook her head. "You're not in charge anymore," she said coldly. "The council is." Rowan's smirk faltered, because he realized too late that bigger sharks were circling, and they had their own plans for Henry and Emily. Plans far worse than he ever imagined. At the emergency shelter that night, Henry sat with Emily and her mother, huddled under thin blankets. The news played softly in the background. Images of their burning home, speculation about targeted violence. No arrests yet. No justice. Henry clenched his fists. Enough was enough. No more running. No more hiding. If the system wouldn't protect them, he would tear it down himself. He looked at Emily, bruised, but unbroken. "We're going to end this," he said quietly. "For good." Emily nodded. Because she wasn't just a scared kid anymore. She was a survivor, and she was ready to fight too. The next morning, Linda burst into the shelter, laptop in hand. "I found it," she cried. Henry stood up, heart pounding. Linda pulled up a hidden server archive, pages of evidence, secret meetings, financial bribes, lists of students threatened into silence. And at the very top, a name neither Henry nor Linda expected: Marcus Reed, the prestigious head of Briarwood Academy, the man who had once offered to help Henry, the man who had been funding Rowan's every move behind the scenes, the real puppet master. Henry, Linda, Emily, and a small group of loyal friends gathered in the shelter's back room. A map of the city lay stretched across the table. They circled Briarwood Academy in red ink. Henry leaned over it, voice low but firm. "They want a war," he said. "Let's give them one." They would expose everything, publicly, at Briarwood's prestigious 100th anniversary gala, an event Reed couldn't cancel or cover up. One shot, one night, no second chances. But as they finalized their plan, a knock sounded at the shelter's door. Linda froze. Henry tensed, motioning for everyone to stay quiet. Another knock, harder this time. Henry approached cautiously, peering through the cracked blinds. And there, standing on the porch, was a face he never expected. Daniel, an old friend from Henry's past. A man Henry once trusted with his life. But Daniel wasn't smiling. And tucked in the waistband of his jeans, barely hidden, was a gun. Henry's stomach twisted, because sometimes the deepest betrayals come from the people who once stood at your side. The camera zooms in on Henry's conflicted, devastated face and fades to black. The shelter fell silent. Henry's hand hovered near his belt, instinct, after years of survival. "Daniel," he said carefully, "what are you doing here?" Daniel's face was carved with guilt. "I didn't come to hurt you," he said hoarsely. "But they have my family. They're watching every move I make." Henry's heart twisted. He understood better than anyone the impossible choices fear could force. Still, his voice was firm. "You don't have to work for them," Henry said. "You can help us end this." Daniel hesitated, torn between loyalty and terror. And finally, he made his choice. He slid the gun across the floor toward Henry. "I'm with you," Daniel whispered. All the way. Together, they refined their plan. The Briarwood 100th Anniversary Gala, glitzy, televised, impossible to silence, they would leak the files to every major news outlet at the same time. But more than that, Henry would confront Marcus Reed face to face, on stage, where the whole world would see the truth. Linda set up secure backups. Daniel arranged safe exits. Emily, despite the danger, insisted on being there. "This is my fight too," she said bravely. Henry looked into her determined eyes and nodded. Together, they would bring the giants down. The gala sparkled under 1,000 crystal lights. Wealthy donors in tuxedos sipped champagne. Marcus Reed, polished and smiling, shook hands and made promises he never intended to keep. Behind the velvet curtains, Henry, Linda, Daniel, and Emily waited, nerves electric. Henry adjusted his old fraying tie. He didn't fit here. But tonight, he would tear their gilded world apart. The cue came. The music swelled, and the moment arrived. Marcus Reed took the stage, basking in applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "tonight we celebrate a century of excellence." He didn't finish. Henry stepped onto the stage. The crowd gasped. Reed's smile faltered. Security moved, but Daniel, posing as one of them, waved them back. Henry stood tall, voice steady. "I was part of this school once," he said into the microphone. "I cleaned your halls, fixed your windows, listened to your broken children when no one else would." Murmurs rippled through the room. "And while you celebrated your success," Henry continued, "you covered up pain, bribed silence, destroyed lives." He turned to Reed. "And it ends tonight." Linda hit send on her laptop backstage. Screens across the room lit up, documents, payments, signatures. Proof. Undeniable. Unstoppable. Chaos exploded. News outlets broke into live coverage. Reporters shouted questions. Board members fled. Marcus Reed's face turned ghostly pale. He lunged for Henry, but security, real security, tackled him to the ground. Rowan was arrested minutes later at the bar he had hidden in. Sheriff Dalton tried to run, but the public dragged him into custody too. The crowd outside the gala, armed with truth, erupted in cheers. The web of lies shattered. The giants fell, and the ones who had been silenced finally roared. Weeks later, Lincoln High reopened under new leadership. Henry Carter was offered a public apology and a new job. Not as a janitor, but as director of student welfare. He almost said no. But when he saw Emily standing proudly beside her mother, he realized something. It was never about titles. It was about making sure no kid felt invisible ever again. He accepted, and every morning, when he walked those halls, students waved and smiled. Not because he was powerful, but because he was kind, because they knew he would see them. Emily became a voice for others, organizing peer support groups, speaking at town meetings. She wasn't a scared, sobbing girl in a stairwell anymore. She was strong, unbreakable. And she never forgot the man who listened, the man who taught her that sometimes being brave simply meant refusing, stay silent. One evening, Henry sat in the school's quiet garden, the one Emily had helped build. He pulled out a photo from his pocket, the same worn picture he carried all those years. His wife, his son, gone, but never forgotten. Henry smiled through tears. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I made a difference." And somewhere in the soft twilight breeze, he could almost hear their voices whispering back, "You did." Real strength isn't about power, wealth, or titles. It's about kindness. About standing up again and again, even when the world tells you to sit down. Dulling. What lesson did Henry's journey teach you? Have you ever felt invisible, and who helped you find your voice? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might be the light someone else needs. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true, powerful tales that remind us one act of kindness can change everything.